I do believe that if you can find stuff that you enjoy,
Mm,
then you get the engagement and you get the sense of purpose that's good for you in those. So it's
absolutely.
helping your health, but it can also seriously help your financial situation.
Hello and welcome back to the Personal Investor Podcast. I'm Ed Monk and I'm joined today by Andrew Oxlade, my colleague here at Fidelity. And we're here to talk about something that increasingly is a financial necessity for many of us, but something which, if it's done right, could also be the secret to a happy retirement. And that something is working and earning money, of course, at much later ages, including at ages that many of us would expect to be long retired from the world of work. Andrew, welcome along. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Ed?
I'm very well. I'm very well. Now, I'm determined for this conversation to be a positive one about steps that we can all take to improve the quality of our lives at later ages. But let's face it, some people are going to hear that we're talking about working longer, working later into life, and they're going to say, well, that is exactly the opposite of what I want to be
Mm.
doing. Um, so convince us, why should we all worry a bit less about having to work for longer?
Well, this is the big challenge of our age, isn't it? We're basically all living longer
Hmm.
and living healthier for longer as well. But we're not retiring any later, or not significantly retiring later. And so that causes problems in being able to fund and afford those much longer retirements. But there's an argument for the fact that people enjoy work and could be working longer.
Hmm.
And I know that's not everyone, but I think there's an argument for moving your life and your career towards what you enjoy and what you can do for longer.
Yeah.
And in doing so, we'd all be able to continue working to much later age.
Yeah, and this ties in with basically life expectancy, which has been rising in general. There's some noise in those numbers, isn't there?
Yeah,
But the general trend is of people living longer, not just living longer, but having longer or more years of healthy life.
yeah,
So are able to do more in later life. We see that reflected in rises in the state pension age, which people always grumble about, but the government will always argue that actually, look, people are able, apart from it being necessary from a kind of, revenue saving point of view,
mm,
people are able to work longer. That's we're able to work longer. It's not just we're having to work
totally,
longer.
totally. I mean, the state pension, particularly. I mean, you think about when it was introduced in 1909. I think it was actually kicked in. And people were typically dying before 60 when that was introduced. And it was
Yeah,
actually introduced when it was at 70. And it's come down over the
yeah,
years, whilst we're all living far longer than that.
yeah,
My life expectancy, I'm 51 today, and I've looked it up on the ONS calculator, the death day calculator, as I rather macabre call it, but it's actually a life expectancy calculator.
yeah.
I am due to last until I'm 84,
Hmm.
which is incredible, isn't it? Considering where we were even just a few decades ago.
Yeah, and I think people, you can look at the data and get that story,
Mm,
but you don't have to look at the data, do you? I think we all we have an idea of what counts as old,
mm,
and I think the problem is that we get that idea quite early in our lives from
yeah,
our parents, and actually I think even from our grandparents. That is for many people their idea of an old person, but the problem is that is going to be 30, 40, 50 years out of date. I actually had I will mention this. Yeah, I could have thought of this recently. I was rewatching, don't ask me why I was doing this, but I was rewatching the Talking Heads dramas, but they're written by Alan Bennett.
okay.
This will be like a familiar for like anyone above a certain
This
age
is
in Britain.
classically highfalutin for you, Ed,
Yeah,
as
and
ever. Straight over my head, but
yeah,
go on.
in those like little television playthings, there's plenty of characters that are all like retirement age and older,
Mm.
played by quite old actors. Thor Hurd plays one of these
No,
characters, for
okay, yeah,
example.
yeah.
And in this play, she's like presented absolutely as an elderly person. She's right at the end of her life.
Mm.
This is familiar territory for Alan Bennett. Um, and and there's no doubt that she's a very elderly person. And then she goes on to say, "Oh, yeah, I'm 75 years old." And that was written in the 80s. And in the
Mm.
80s, it just brought home that that's what the idea of a very, very old person was.
Yeah, totally.
Um,
Yeah.
that's when we learn this stuff, isn't it? And it's it's wrong information. It's out of date.
Yeah, totally. I mean, for my part, all my grandparents were dead before 65, and half of them before 60. Yet
Yeah.
my parents are, approaching 80, and still
Yes.
fine. So it
Yes.
is a big shift, and we've all got those anecdotes of our own experience that reinforce that. I mean, the thing that really hit home is this research recently that was cited by the International Monetary Fund,
Yep.
where they talked about cognitive ability, and that the incredible shift, according to this data that they'd collated, lots of countries included in this, and it showed that basically a 53-year-old, the difference, it was you may have seen the headlines, it was 70 is the new 53 is the new 70, sorry.
Yes.
So i.e., within a space of 20 years, between 2000 and 2020, the cognitive ability of a 53-year-old back then is a 70-year-old now.
Yeah.
And that is incredible, over 2 decades for it to shift so much. And so that opens up all of these questions of why are we living our lives, to your point, in a mode of how we've been conditioned to, which is that we're not going to live that long, so we need to retire and enjoy it. But actually, we're going to live longer, we're going to have healthier lives, and we're going to be sharper. And that's a key thing for the fact you can still carry on earning money, carry on working. And there's also plenty of evidence around the fact that if you're working longer, then that is better for your cognitive health anyway.
Well, and we're going to come on to all of this because we did say that this was the secret to a happy and more financially secure retirement. But that stat around 53, or the cognitive ability of a 53-year-old in 2000 being the same as 70 now in the year 2000, that's really interesting because people at the age 53 are going to be thinking, I'm absolutely of working age. At 53, I'm able to work, able to do a job. And there you have it. Look, not a physical thing, but a cognitive, mental thing. You should have the wherewithal to actually still be working. Anyway, look, we've covered a lot of the ground of like why it's possible for people to work longer. How about the reasons why it might be necessary for them to do? And I'm thinking about the sort of financial side of this.
Yeah, I mean, this is the sort of flip side of all of this and this is probably the gloomier side that we're generally not saving enough. There's a massive sort of funding gap in terms of people putting aside for pensions and retirement, and therefore you've got a longer span to cover. Typically this can now be 35 years. I mean, if people are talking about trying to retire at 60, then that's a much longer, 3 decades of funding that they're going to probably need to find. And all of that can be changed quite dramatically by a little bit of extra work. Now, I know this sounds terrible, doesn't it? But I do believe that if you can find stuff that you enjoy, then you get the engagement and you get the sense of purpose that's good for you in those. Absolutely. So it's helping your health, but it can also seriously help your financial situation. So if you take it on a very basic example, so say if you were hoping to get £500,000 to fund your retirement, and then you decide, well, actually, do you know what? I'm going to work 1 day a week. If you do that 1 day a week, and this is a very crude thing because obviously you're probably not going to work until you die, but that becomes £400,000 that you need because of that extra income that you would have. It's quite a dramatic thing. And the same thing is if you start playing around with the either going part-time or just working longer generally, it really dramatically changes those numbers.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's so much to say on this topic. I mean, we obviously here at Fidelity, it's our business to help people save for retirement, make that money last. And we're quite used to saying, in terms of sort of improving your prospects in retirement, there's basically 3 levers you can pull. You can save more. You can live on less. That's the other thing. You can that's actually part of the picture. We should probably talk about that at some point as well. Just like, that mental shift around just kind of living a smaller, less extravagant life. Or you can work later. And the working later option, when you add it all up, often is the most attractive one, because you're earning money. You're maybe earning what you need to live day to day. That means actually you have fewer years to pay for from just your savings. It can be transformational, and as you say, there's all sorts of other benefits as well.
Well, I would and this isn't about, there's a last minute option to this, isn't there? And some of that is sort of being forced to do it because you can't afford to retire, etc. So you work longer. I think there's a much more positive thing here, and it applies to all generations and all ages. There were the longevity books, the 100-Year Life books that were
Yep.
knocking about a few years ago. Andrew Scott and Linda
Grattan,
Grattan,
yeah.
and they talk about this, that the 100-year life challenge of more of us are going to live to 100, and how are you going to pay for that? How are you going to cope? Then how are you going to live your whole life differently? So I'm not. This begins at 20. This begins at younger than 20.
Yeah.
This begins at 30 if you're at that age. Of how do you angle your life around that challenge? So that can be putting aside a kind of optionality fund, I think I've called it in the article that I wrote on this on the online. An optionality fund means that you've got money put aside that you can access early, and therefore it gives you options to go and retrain, do another career, gives you options to take a break. Having a breaks in your career can help with that longevity, to help see you through. And the retraining is absolutely key. And also just thinking about your life differently, about trying to move towards those things that you love and think that will give you that longer career.
Yeah. And we should say, we framed it as like working later, but it's not like, oh yeah, that job that you're going to have and build and that career you're going to have, just continue that for another 5 years. It's not really that, is it? It's saying, yes, you might work longer, but you might have changed slightly earlier what you do,
Totally.
how you do it, where you
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
All these things that give you choice. And it's amazing. It's like a psychological thing. As soon as something becomes optional, as in you might want to have to work, but you're going to do it more on your terms, it's less of a burden. And it's the compulsion to have to be there 5 days a week, full time, working, maximizing your income. That's what is the slog. If it were all a bit more optional,
absolutely,
it's easier to get your head around.
And isn't the world changing towards this? Certainly governments want us to work longer. They've got a massive funding problem for affording for all of us to be in retirement, for more people going to be retired because there's a population bulge, and for longer. So there's double cost. So there's a real movement of trying to encourage people. I mean, you'll know that the age of compulsory retirement was axed around 15 years ago. So before that, they could force people out of their jobs anyway at that sort of age. And there's just, more importantly almost than that, is a mind shift change, and employers see the value in people having older people in work. There's this lovely story of the guy the other week who was working at Waitrose. Now he had written to the Times newspaper to say about this, so it was a completely unprompted, unPR'd type thing. It was a real nice story of a guy who's 93 and he got his job at Waitrose when he was 80. And it was basically, he was a bit bored in retirement, and he just wanted a bit of a challenge. He just likes talking to people, and apparently there's a queue he gets for his checkout. He's actually on the tills as well. Do you know what I mean? So this is it's very heartening to see, and apparently the queue is just because people want to talk to him.
Yeah,
not what you're thinking, Ed, because he's a bit slow.
But he's a bit slow on the tills. But actually, and this is where we veer into territory that's more, I don't know, philosophical or something. But loneliness is a problem, and I think the conversation around this is improving. But community, connection, meaning, we're getting a better understanding of these things, and actually those things are what you need to be happy. This is why in the title of the show today we're calling it "This is the secret for a happy retirement." It's not just a richer retirement, is it? It's actually giving yourself a better life later in life.
Exactly. And that mind shift change isn't, I do totally understand that people hold it very tightly, this notion of, I need to retire early.
Yeah, we're not telling everyone to get down Sainsbury's and
No, quite. And it's about pre-planning. It's about pre-thinking, pre-planning, giving yourself optionality. But I think that people just, what I would say is just don't rule it out. Don't try to challenge your own thinking of, I need to hit 55 and get out of this damn job, which is a very common thing that people feel. And I understand it's years and years of working hard and doing the slog. But there is a perception change that can aid a totally different route. And to your point, all of those things are absolutely crucial. There's research on all of those. There was definitely research, particularly on that loneliness issue. The link between loneliness and early death is strong. And these things mean, yes, you'll live longer and you'll live better. I mean, as you know, I did this, my chill movement it's a year ago, actually. I wrote that. I can't believe it's a year skipped by.
Remind us of the acronym.
So chill, So basically, there's the FIRE acronym, which is the Financial Independence Retire Early, and a very big, strong movement in the US where everybody is, saving
Saving
huge amounts. 70% of
extreme.
income is
Yeah.
the goal to try and get out of the rat race by 55 or 50 or whatever your target age is. Of course, you can't access your pension here until 55 anyway, and that's rising to 57 soon. Again, another consideration for people to think about. Chill is the sort of reverse. So obviously chill, FIRE, you get it right. But it's career happiness inspires longer lives. And that is all of that stuff I've just spoken about. Now, there's been sort of a mixed reaction to that I've seen, and particularly places like LinkedIn, you get a very strong reaction there, as in positive reaction. The Reddit group for FIRE, less positive reaction. But again, even within the Reddit, even within the FIRE movement, there is this kind of, there is the FIRE light type approach where it is more of that. I include a bit of work. It's amazing when you talk to people about this, and you see it on LinkedIn particularly, because there's a lot of people there engaged in their careers, and that's why they're on there. And they all have these plans to do stuff. It may be consultancy, it may be stuff in the gig economy that enable a lot more of that. And again, that's the way the economy is moving. We're going to be short of millions of workers in the UK over the next decade or two, or even sooner than that, actually. And the primary way that could be plugged, which the government will be encouraging, is for older people to make it easier for them to work.
Yeah, and you've laid out a couple of routes that people could take and ways to think about it. But whatever age you're at, it feels like you can begin to form a plan. What's going to be your thing? How might you make it work, kind of thing. And I was having a conversation recently with someone about these platforms where people can upload their skills and get hired on a kind of very ad hoc basis, work from home, just applying whatever they've learned, whatever skills they've had. This is where the retraining thing maybe comes in. And there is actually crossover with FIRE, because part of it might be a passive income from investments. It might be that, if you've done reasonably well, you want to turn your savings into income generating savings for a while, and work alongside that and mix your finances in a way that just would have been not the norm.
Well, there's so much more flexibility now, isn't it? And that's what sort of pension income drawdown has given people, which is the ability to do that. So you're not just taking the fixed return of an annuity, but you can have your portfolio invested, and as you say, you can build it up, and it becomes basically your retirement salary, doesn't it? Is the other way to look at it, of that additional income that can meet your needs.
That's it. Okay, well, look, I think that just about covers it. Before I go, I would urge everybody watching or listening to seek out Andrew's article. It covers all of these things that we've spoken about and more. That's at fidelity.co.uk. And if you found this useful or interesting, please do hit the like button, maybe even subscribe to the channel, or share or review. It's going to help many more people find this content. That is it for now. Andrew, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Ed.